that's the kind of crash we like. Thank you, Kate. This is Kate Ellis, cellist and artistic director of Crash Ensemble, and this is Guillaume Auvray, a composer, conductor, and for the purposes of our discussion, interdisciplinary artist. Yeah. So we'll be focusing on the interdisciplinary art. But just to go to you first, Kate.
Yeah.
So you have a very old instrument there. I mean, it had a precursor that's even older than the model that you're playing. And one of my great heroes, Jaron Lanier, who's a computer scientist and philosopher of computers and musician, said that the musical instrument, the oldest of them, even the oldest instruments, were the best user interface ever invented and have never been surpassed. So, in a sense, why get involved? We're going to talk about technology.
Yeah.
And he also makes the point, I think, that when, an instrument in the hands of somebody who can play it very well can do a lot. You can make it do a lot. But technology, once you bring technology into the picture, it can do so much more. I mean, it can expand the field of possibilities for everything, for sound, reproduction, but what it can't ever replace are the hands and
No.
So why get involved with technology when you're already so good?
Oh. So I think from our perspective, or certainly from my perspective as a musician playing in a group of 10 other players, there's a certain side of what we do that maybe as an audience member you wouldn't have access to. So, there's the kind of the intricacies of a particular communication with a particular member of the ensemble. There's kind of an unspoken communication that we've developed between ourselves for over a number of years. And I think I kind of saw this opportunity of creating a virtual reality installation of us as a kind of an insider perspective. So placing the audience kind of in the very middle of the ensemble, so that they would, they'd get to see this kind of unspoken communication between the players, and they'd get to see, from my perspective, as if I was an audience member, kind of sometimes all I really want to do is to get a magnifying glass and actually just kind of like sneak up to the stage and kind of look at someone really closely, or study their hand or study their movements, and I think that was kind of what we were going for.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Cormac said and Michael in the earlier interview, that down here, I mean, it was completely integrated. In other words, dance music was for the dancers, and the dancers were just everybody, and even the musicians were pretty well part of a community, so the whole thing was joined up in every way.
Yeah.
And that process of experiencing art of any kind, but particularly music, has broken down. And the audience part of it has been put in chairs, sat in rigid formations, exposed to performance in an increasingly passive way, with directional speakers going out. It is sometimes, I said to Michael, I found it torture to sit and watch Mom without moving, because the natural inclination is, if you're anyway musical, and all people are, is to move. So what I like, having seen the VR experience of the next piece that we're going to hear, that is definitely breaking through there. So, and I gather there's even more technology where you can spookily actually maybe inhabit
That's the hope.
The person who's playing, which is. But anyway, Guillaume, you've gone this way now. Like you, once upon a time, you composed. You were an analog person. Why? What brought you here, and what brought you to Ireland? By the way, before we go any further, actually, this isn't a tangent, but I just thought for the Irish audience, it was interesting. On Guillaume's excellent website, and under his CV, he says, as a child, and like most Belgians, he started studying harmony, music history, music theory, piano and accompaniment at the village music school.
There you go.
The Village Music School is.
that's how we call it
I
in
think
Belgium.
there's no such thing in Ireland as the Village
Well, we
Music
can-
School, but this is obviously a very early start, which would be fantastic for all children. You know.
I believe, well, so I went through my studies also, well, up to contemporary classical music, composing, which is great. I'm very delighted to have studied that. But what is important and what I've found here back actually in Ireland is the beauty of history behind it, where I believe that we are losing that a little bit. It's the understanding and the appropriation of our own history before going further. And I believe also strongly that as well in music as general history, it's something that we should push forward in schools as well culturally as our own history as a country, and that's when people ask me, why do you come to Ireland? It's like just, well, what Michael said before, people beforehand were watching the continent. Well, now we are watching Ireland because there's something so grounded into their culture that it's still present and well, from my perspective, there's something so rich here in Ireland about the culture that is still there. And I'm changing. Well, I was composing, so I took a little break about that because myself as a person, I'm changing since I'm embracing the beauty and the richness here around me. And like he said, well, like no, what's his name again? Not Michael, but
Cormac.
Cormac, thank you. I'm still very bad in Gaelic names. My apologies. What Cormac said. Musical voice and personality goes together.
Yes.
And that history is grounded with us.
And it's interesting that you're here in that environment doing what you're doing, which is pretty cutting edge in terms of the new frontier in music. So explain why you think that's a good thing to do.
So it's a good thing because we can widespread art, but mostly the culture and an identity through the new technologies. New technologies can be beautiful, can be less beautiful, but there is that way of sharing stories, sharing an identity, sharing a culture throughout that. And I see that with some of my students I had in Belgium, where we are on Facebook and so on. They have quit Facebook, they are on another platform. And these platforms of communication will change and will grow throughout the generations. They will always get through other stuff. And I think if we want to share our art, or mostly your art, we need also to be ready to get our comfort of the concert hall into other medias, into other way of experiencing that, more interactive or more immersive, which VR and the work in progress we are doing is a first step. And I know there are a lot of other artists doing the same and even further and other, because it's a tool. And from that tool we can get so many other ways to share an idea, to share a culture, to share an image and a story.
And I think that yesterday we heard a lot about the dark side of technology, and some very dystopian scenarios were revealed. And this is the other side of that. Now, VR technology has its dark side as well. We don't need to go there today. But where do you see yourself going with this now? Actually, maybe you should tell everybody what it is first. What is it you've done with?
So what we've created with Crash Ensemble is that idea of an immersive environment. So VR, virtual reality. We are used to watch a screen, just flat screen, but VR is actually englobing yourself into a 360 environment. So you're in a sphere. And what we do in that sphere is we project what we record visually into that sphere, and you're somewhere inside of it. For the moment, it's just one location, so you can't move in that space. But further down the path is the idea is to have the ability to bring people going closer to the musician and so on. So getting way further and offer also more freedom to the viewer to walk throughout the music and the experience.
So, Kate, for you, the Crash Ensemble has always looked for ways to break down the distance between itself and the people who love Crash and the audiences. So you've done performances in extraordinary places, and there are beautiful films of those experiences online and so on. So you were never afraid at any stage that the technology would take over, or that you would be, the slaves of the technology in any sense.
No, I don't think so. I think, having said as an audience member, it would be great to kind of have a way of, being right in the center of something. I think there's also something about sharing an experience with an audience and not being the single person who's having this musical experience. And I think you're never going to be able to, being a musician or being an artist or being a creator, that's a very personal and individual part of your personality. And I think that's never going to be replaced. That's never going to be possible to emulate a person's soul or a person's natural way of feeling or natural way of natural ability. So I don't fear the robots.
You don't look like a robot.
I don't fear the musical robots anyway. I fear the other robots. But anyway, so yeah.
And you said something interesting when I met you first, which I did find a bit scary, which is that if VR is an early learning experience, say that it can, because your whole body memorizes things, like you have muscle memory, and you've got movement memory, and you've got response, and so on. And if that is mediated through VR, that where are we going with that? Given that we normally, do eye-to-eye contact, and we shake hands, and there's physical touch, and so on. Where does it sit in the vocabulary of communication at that level with children, say, in an educational setting? Sorry.
That's a good question. I try to stay in the art world where we try to share that story. So what we were speaking about were more the darker side of VR, and where image, sound, and storylines creates that other sense, and creates, like what Camille from VR Ireland, that I'm grateful, she helped me a lot and she mentored me into VR, is saying creates fake memories. While here, what we try to do is not creating fake memories. We don't try to put someone into an ideology that we want people to embrace. What we want is actually to share something, to give to the people instead of getting the people for us. Well, that's my thought about that, and what we do here with Crash and what we hope doing further in the art sector is another tool for widespreading something. But really, we give to the people instead of trying to gather people for us.
And Kate, from the point of view of performance now for the Crash, I mean, this is, there's only this one short piece of VR there available. Yeah. But do you, for example, ever see yourself performing live with VR as an added element?
I think we've been talking a lot about how we move from just this one video to something that, again, connects back, like Guillaume was saying, connects back to the actual, the real event. And I think it could be really interesting to pursue a version of a performance where there's the real audience, there's the real people, but then at the same time there's a virtual reality version of the same thing happening. So maybe, we could be playing a 5-minute piece, and you could the option to switch between being in the virtual reality and being in the reality, I think could be really interesting.
So you could literally wear a headset, walk around live musicians playing live, and experience that.
Yes, in a virtual way.
In a virtual way. But have them there. So I think that's called actually mixed reality, is it? Because the room is still there. Like you could reach out and touch the real musicians, but you could also have the experience of maybe being closer to them than you than you would normally could ever be at a performance. Is that possible?
Yeah, well, I try to understand the difference what you were saying both again, but there are ways to so you were speaking about live streaming from a performance to another place.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about
actually being physically
present, or being very close to.
Yeah. And then you enhance the experience by augmented reality.
There's so many modifications.
What we call in the extended realities, it's a very broad panel, but like what we said with Michael beforehand, we don't have to forget that technology is beautiful, we can do a lot with technology, but here in our case, we try to focus to the storytelling. It's really, the tool should support our art and not the art supporting the showcase of innovation in the tools. What I think a lot of creators and artists are afraid of, when I did my research about that and I worked with a string quintet in Belgium, they are like, yeah, but we don't want to feel awkward when we're experiencing it, because they were afraid of the technology, knowing that technology sometimes is putting before the artistic part. And so we are at a moment where VR, AR, well, all the extended realities offers a lot of possibilities. Needs a lot of budget also. We won't speak about that. But we are also there where we can also, well, just put the story and the people before technology. And I think that's something we have to focus on. It's like technology we can do a lot, but it's not about being geeks showcasing something because the musicians are there. But now it's like, well, let's the geeks being there to support the musicians.
Yes.
And giving the musicians actually their place in what they are doing. So yes, we can do a lot, but should we do it now directly without having a clear view of what we want to share?
And Kate, it's one thing for me to watch the VR experience, or to have the VR experience of Crash, but it's another thing for you, who's actually in it, to watch it. So what's that like?
Slightly surreal.
Because most people could have a problem with photographs of themselves, you know, my best side and so on, but there's nowhere to hide in virtual reality,
absolutely
really.
No hiding. It's a surreal experience, but I remember the first time we had the first reiteration of this particular video, and I'd never actually worn a VR headset, so from my perspective, I wasn't really interested in looking at myself. I was actually way more interested in looking at everyone else and looking up and, you know, just kind of navigating the space, as it were.
So maybe, would you describe just what that's like, just so that anybody here who wants to go in and have that experience, how you go through the experience, and
so the video is it's a 5-minute, or I think around 5-minute piece by an Irish composer called Ed Bennett, and it's kind of a very rhythmical piece. And what Guillaume, being a musician himself, has done is kind of cut the video so that it's in sync with the kind of the phrasing of the music and the rhythm of the music in a way. So we're kind of in this big, old, slightly crumbling room in the National Concert Hall, and you put on the headset, and it's like you're in the center of the ensemble, and people are standing around you, staring at you, playing their instruments. So, yeah, it's actually a really nice thing to kind of really take your time and, you know, study everyone, and you have enough time to do that now in the video to really look at the individual players, to look at the environment, have a look at the ceiling, have a look at the floor. Guillaume's added a few things.
Well, you said I cut it. I should give that back to Nestor from my collective, who is also a filmmaker. He's the magician in this type of stuff. Mm-hmm. So he made the edit. He's the magic maker.
And just before we finish, Guillaume, would you say something about the sound, because it is music, and so the sound is as important and interesting as the look of it.
So yeah, the sound. So well, we worked with the track you recorded with Adrian in studio.
Yes.
So we had all the stems. And we decided to go for what we call a specialized environment, an ambisonic environment. So what I got from Adrian were different stems. And
would you explain what ambisonics mean? Most people have no idea.
And ambisonics, it's
complicated.
spatial audio, which means that when you turn around, the audio will also be mapped into space. Now, that's all the question with art and VR is like, where's the limit between creating the extreme reality where you have the trombone smashing into your ear and the piccolo may be in the other ear, or making a beautiful mix like when you watch a concert live on television, when they zoom on the flute player, they won't make the mix different. Yeah, so there is that spatial environment, but we hold that spatial environment to still the artistic point of view. So ambisonic can be great for realism, but do we want to go to the extreme realism of being smashed with the trombone in one ear when he plays triple forte, or do we want to have the beauty of the music behind? And that's where we go back to the point, we share a story, we share the quality of the musicians and not...
Thank you. That's a very good note to end on because our time is up.
Yeah, I see it's blinking.
It's flashing. And so we'll now go to the shared beauty.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you
Kate.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Guillaume.
Thank you.